Morning, ladies and gentlemen. How are you today? It's Richard and Michelle on this morning's webinar. So webinar series every month. We do usually around 25, 30-minute webinar. And this month we're delighted to have Michelle Wilde with us today, who will be bringing us through mental health and well-being, specifically for managers, employers, HR managers, and team leads. So if you want to just quickly introduce yourself, Michelle, that'd be perfect.
Will do, thank you. So my name is Michelle. I've spent the last 10 years working in employee assistance, working across Australia and Ireland, supporting managers to be able to deal with mental health issues in the workplace.
Perfect. So what we'll go through, probably maybe 5 or 6 slides, and if you have any questions towards the end, then we will have our contact details there, so feel free to reach out. So we'll start firstly with the definitions. Michelle, would be fantastic.
Sure. Okay, so what is mental health? So mental health is mental wellness, in which a person can cope with normal stress in life, they can work productively and function across all aspects of their life. So a person with good mental health, they're confident in their ability to cope with life problems, they can deal constructively with negative emotions, and they stay connected to their supports. When we talk about mental health disorders, it's a diagnosable illness which causes major changes in how a person thinks, their emotional state, and their behaviour, and it will disrupt a person's normal ability to work and function across all areas of their life. So a person's thinking, emotional state, and behaviour become impaired, and their ability to cope and function gets broken down. When we talk about mental health disorders, it's important to say that they're diagnosable. They usually require treatment to improve. It's not something a person can snap out of. It will occur in different levels of severity from one person to the next. You may have 2 employees with mental health issues with depression with different set of symptoms and different levels of severity. So there's different degrees of illness, ranging from mild to moderate to severe. What we know about depression and mental health issues is 1 in 4 people will experience a mental health condition in their lifetime. Anxiety and depression being the most prevalent. At any one time in Ireland, 450,000 people will be affected by depression. So mental health issues affect us whether directly or indirectly.
Excellent.
Okay, so what to look for? So as mentioned, if a person has a mental health issue, their thinking, feeling, physical state, and behaviour will become impaired. It causes changes in these areas and it breaks down their normal ability to function and do what they would normally do. So what to look out for? The first thing I would say is look out for physical signs, physical symptoms. That might be a change in physical appearance for an employee. You might notice weight loss, weight gain. They may appear much more tired, pay less care to their personal hygiene. They may be experiencing sleep disruption, so they may come to work groggy, not able to concentrate. From an emotional perspective, you might recognise they're very flat. It's hard. They may be, on the flip side, overly emotional, irritable, fearful, distressed. They may be much more sad than usual. You may recognise that they'll change their thinking, where they're much more pessimistic, much more fearful, much more negative than usual. They may be irrational, catastrophizing. Their thinking may be very much distorted. Again, their behavior will change. They may be more demotivated. Their concentration might be poor. They may withdraw. So normally they go for lunch with colleagues and they stop doing that. They stop socializing, they stop interacting, and they're much more withdrawn. You might recognize there's more conflict on the team. They're more snappy. Again, more absenteeism, more sick leave. You might recognize a slower pace of work. They're more disorganized, and that can also be linked to medication. So again, their behavior is something to pay attention to.
Excellent. And Michelle, from your experience then, what would be the most, say, important thing that a manager would have to look out for?
So out of all those different areas, I would say behavior. Any change to a person's normal behavior can be a red flag. and something to pay attention to.
Excellent. And I suppose bringing this on to the role of a manager when looking at employees with mental health issues, fantastic.
Okay, so the first thing to say is be proactive, and this can almost be very, very difficult for managers. There's a lot of fear there for managers in terms of whether to address a mental health issue, fear of making it worse, fear what if I push somebody over the edge. But what we know is that managers need to be proactive. Early intervention leads to the best results, the best outcomes for an employee. The longer a person is going through a mental health illness, the more disabled they can become. So addressing it early is pretty important. It's also important from a business perspective. So we know the direct annual cost of poor mental health in Ireland is 3 billion a year. That's 2% of our gross national profit. So we want to try to address it early, put some measures in place, and ideally try and keep the person in the workplace where possible. Okay, the next thing is if you decide to address something with an employee, it's important to be impartial, it's important to be objective, it's important to be factual. We don't need to share any opinions on what we think is wrong with the person's mental health. We stay very much removed and very objective and analytical. There's no need to diagnose the person. There's no need to counsel a person. We stay well away from that. It's not the manager's role. We're not responsible for fixing the employee's personal issues or mental health issues. It's their responsibility to work on that. It's the manager's responsibility to focus back on supporting the employee with practical help and practical adjustments in the workplace. I would suggest that you treat the person the same as you would someone that has a physical illness. You keep good boundaries. So again, we're not doctors, we're not psychologists. We're not friends with the employee. We stay well out of that role. We don't overemphasize with the employee. Where a manager might fall into bother is trying too hard, engaging the employee on their personal matters. How's it going? How are you feeling? And then they find they're meeting the person more and more and more. The managers themselves can feel quite burdened. It also puts the manager into a very difficult position in the future. They need to escalate something from a reporting perspective, such as a safety issue, or if they need to put a person on a performance management plan, because those boundaries have then been blurred. I would say consider confidentiality issues. So we know there's privacy legislation out there to protect a person with mental health issues. Information would need to be shared on a needs-to-know basis with the employee's consent. So if an employee alludes to self-harm or suicide, or there's a safety or risk issue, the manager will need to escalate that. They have a duty of care to escalate that and to report that to make sure the person's picked up by the appropriate service. Outside of a risk issue, a manager cannot share information about a person's mental health without the person's consent. So we may say to an employee, Jane, I'm concerned about you. You've told me that you're experiencing depression, that you're really struggling in your role. I'm not going to be here for 2 weeks, I'm on leave. How would you feel if I let another manager know what's happening so they can check in with you and they can make sure that you're okay in my absence? So you're working with the person's consent and you're keeping an environment of trust with the person outside of a risk issue. Okay, supporting the person to seek help. So our role is to obviously offer the practical support and then signpost the person towards the appropriate service to seek help. Whether that's for emotional support, we point them in the right direction and we try and connect them to that referral.
Okay. And from a diagnosis or counselling point of view from a manager, can you maybe further elaborate on that? Shall it be perfect?
Okay, so you're speaking with an employee. They share with you that they think they're depressed, they think they're anxious, they're going through a very difficult time. It's important that you don't diagnose them. You can listen to the person and you can let them get it off their chest. They might get upset telling you what they're going through. You can give them tissues, you can give them a glass of water, you can be there to listen, to be compassionate, be non-judgmental, but then once they get it off their chest, Then you bring them back to the workplace. Then you bring them back to the workplace needs. Well, what will help you in your role?
Excellent, that was a great example there. So moving on then to the C.A.R.E model, if you want to bring us through concern, agreed action, refer appropriately, and empower wellness.
Okay. So you're preparing to sit down with somebody, you suspect they have a mental health issue, or they've openly shared that with you. So the C.A.R.E acumen. So C, you start off by addressing your concerns with the employee, and you keep it very tangible. So you might say to Jane, I'm concerned about you. You've missed work twice last week. You're behind in deadlines. You've been snappy. You're more withdrawn than what you used to be. You're not coming out to have lunch with us. So what's happening? So in that example, it's tangible feedback that you give the employee. You don't say to Jane, I think you're depressed. I think you're highly anxious. So you stay away from those labels and keep it factual by expressing tangible examples. From there, you want to put the onus back on the employee by asking the employee what's happening. So in order to come up with an agreed action plan, we need to understand the landscape. So Jane, what's happening for you? And let Jane come forward to explain what's happening. You might ask Jane, well, what's happening and how is it impacting your role? So you're trying to get them to focus on what they need in the workplace. So they might find that certain deadlines are more difficult. They might find that a certain part of the role is causing them stress if you're going through anxiety and depression. But you get them to share that. And then you want them to come forward with some suggestions. What would be helpful? And let them suggest different options so that they take some responsibility. With reasonable accommodation, we do have a responsibility to provide reasonable accommodation measures to an employee if we know they're experiencing a mental health issue. So as part of your action plan, you might try to brainstorm and problem solve some reasonable adjustment options that might support the person to continue in their role. An example might be varying start times, taking breaks, breaking tasks into meaningful chunks, allowing more time for certain tasks, moving an employee to a quieter area if that's helpful, giving them a buddy if that's helpful. So there are some examples of reasonable adjustments. So we can problem solve and brainstorm those options with an employee to try and come up with an action plan. And then when we have that action plan, it's about following up. Okay, so between now and next week, you're going to do X, Y, Z. You're going to try and implement breaking down your tasks. You're going to meet with such and such. So you try and have something that they can work towards, and then follow up, and then review what's working and what's not working. If reasonable adjustments aren't working, well then what's happening? It's looking at trying to problem solve again and be sure that the employee is fully engaged in these reasonable action plans, in these reasonable actions, so that they're set up to try to progress the situation. They refer appropriately. So if you're concerned about an employee and you have the practical solutions in place that you're monitoring, but you're concerned about their mental health, the first point of call would usually be to refer someone to their EAP if they have an employee assistance set up. If you hit barriers with that, which managers sometimes can, an employee might be nervous about engaging in an EAP for whatever reason, stigma, fears. So if that happens for you and you're hitting a brick wall and you're still concerned about the person's emotional wellness, you're very welcome to contact us here. We have a number of services that will assist you to be able to get the person into the right service. So the last thing is, with referring, there are other options that are available for managers. It might be you have a company doctor. So if you're concerned about someone's mental health and you want to refer them to the company doctor, that's an option. Also, the occupational health and safety person. So if you've an occupational person, you can refer them there. The last thing is around empowering wellness. So what we want to do is try to create a culture of wellness across our organisations. We know that 50% of people who have a mental health issue don't access help. And again, it's usually about fear, stigma. So for us, it's about being able to create a wellness strategy that makes it safe for employees to share their mental health issues, to approach a manager, to approach a HR person, and to be sure that they'll be given a reasonable degree of support. So what we do offer is, and what we find extremely beneficial, is we offer soft skills training for managers to equip them with the skills and tools to manage employees who do approach them, so that they know what to do and they can put a very good plan in place.
And in relation to, I suppose, to takeaway tips, I suppose at the end of each webinar, we always, well, towards the end, we always have to give a few tips that what people can maybe put in place straight away after experiencing certain issues. I think Michelle can run us through there as well.
Okay. So again, it's not avoiding or ignoring a problem. The longer it's left, the worse it can get. So putting a plan in place and following up and staying on top of it. To interact with a person as normally as possible. To treat them the same way you would someone that says they have a broken arm or they have another physical health issue. To offer the practical help to support the person's needs in the workplace. So again, looking at anti-discrimination legislation, we need to put measures in place to support a person with mental health issues so that they can perform in their role and that their needs are met. So as managers, we have a duty of care to take reasonable action. So then it's also supporting the person to get psychological help or medical help. So knowing where to refer the person, but also knowing how to refer the person, how to address barriers, how to address defensiveness, to be able to overcome these obstacles so the person gets connected to the right service. Be clear on our limitations to the role. If you find that you're jumping through hoops and you're trying everything, or you're texting an employee over the weekend, it's telling us that there's boundaries are being overstepped. There's only so much you can do, and there's only so much responsibility you can take. After that, you need to escalate and get the right professional services on board, and let us take over to be able to, to manage any duty of care. So you share your duty of care. To engage professional support, the last thing is your own self-care. These are difficult situations for managers. They can be very stressful if a manager is managing a difficult employee case. So if you find you're driving home on a Friday evening and you're still thinking about an employee, now you're obviously carrying that particular case. So making sure that you link in with us and that you're able to be debriefed and that you can find strategies yourself so that you can switch off over the weekend and not be too impacted by these scenarios.
Excellent. I think something there I might step in on as well is, especially when you're dealing with employees that may see signs of mental health issues. Asking them, how can I help, is definitely them 4 words or can be very beneficial for the employee, as well as making them more feel at ease. So thanks very much, Michelle, for them takeaway tips. And just a few things on our, I suppose, support and consultation.
Okay, so this is a service that we offer to managers and to HR. It's a telephone service. And what we do is you can contact our service, you can speak to someone like myself, you can speak to one of my colleagues, and we can discuss an individual case. We can assist you by pointing out any duty care issue. We can help you prepare to have a conversation with an employee, and we can help you develop strategies so that you know what to do. After you've met the employee, you can contact us again, we can debrief. If you're hitting walls, it's particularly useful because this is an area that managers can get stuck on. So we help you through these difficult scenarios to keep things moving. It's used for managing employees with mental health issues, or it might be a people management issue. It could be a conflict situation that you're stuck in a situation where there's conflict on your team and you're struggling to be able to resolve it, again, we can step in and offer some direction, advice, and assist you put strategies in place. Or it might be that you're working with difficult personalities, which can often happen in the workplace. Or you have someone on your team that's been off work on on stress leave, and you want to support them to return to work. So we can assist you again by putting a plan in place that safeguards the organisation and the employee.
Perfect. Thanks very much, Michelle. And that really concludes our webinar. As we always say, we keep it nice, short and snappy. We are conscious that you're in work as well, but also this is a very important topic, and we've seen extreme interest in this as well. And we can always see this from our attendee list. So from the contact details, if you'd like to contact us yourselves, my particular email is richard@zevohealth.com. We have our phone number, Dublin phone number here, and also the website is zevohealth.com. So thanks very much, Michelle, for your time this morning. The expertise and advice has been invaluable, and definitely I've learned a bit this morning. Hopefully you guys have as well. Have a good day today. Hopefully you enjoy work, and I will talk to you soon. Keep an eye out for our next webinar, which will be coming up in May. Details of that will be out very soon. Thanks very much. Thank you. Bye.